So a few years ago I moved to Spain from the UK, and since moving I've had the chance to do quite a few bike trips here, from single day trips to multi-day trips to multi-week trips. For example, when I first moved to Spain I actually moved to Barcelona, but I flew to Bilbao and then spent about 10 days cycling from Bilbao to Barcelona with all of my things. Since then I've cycled around the coast of Mallorca, around the coast of Ibiza, and even spent about 3 weeks cycling from Barcelona to Lisbon. So I thought I'd just make a quick video to share 5 of the things that I've learned whilst cycle touring in Spain. So when cycle touring, my preference in terms of accommodation, like most people, is to camp, and the same is true when I'm in Spain as well. And I've stayed at some cheap municipal campsites in Spain that cost me about €10. I've stayed at some private campsites in nice areas that cost about €30. My preference is definitely to wild camp where possible, and I've stayed in some really cool wild camping spots by the sea and forests, and I've even slept between switchbacks on a few occasions. My understanding is that wild camping is technically not legal in Spain, although it is very much possible, and I think as long as you respect the environment, as long as you take your things with you, and as long as you are discreet, you're probably not going to have any problems if you attempt to wild camp while cycle touring through Spain. So one interesting geographical fact about Spain is that it actually has one of the highest average altitudes in all of Europe. It's about 5th or 6th on that list, with an average altitude of about 650 meters. And of course, one reason for that is the presence of big mountain ranges such as the Pyrenees in the north and the Sierra Nevada in the south. But another reason is the presence of this huge plateau in the center called the Meseta Central. So the Meseta Central is about 400,000 square kilometers, which is almost the size of California. It's bigger than Britain, and the temperature is quite different from in the more famous tourist regions such as Barcelona, Valencia, the Costa del Sol. And the weather is characterized by big differences between daytime and nighttime temperatures, and between summertime and wintertime temperatures. For example, in the city of Guadalajara, in the center of this plateau, the average high in July is about 33 degrees, and the average low in January is about -1 degrees. So it's worth bearing in mind, if you're thinking of doing a cycle tour through Spain, that much of the country actually has a climate that's quite different from the Mediterranean climates that we often think about when we think about Spain. So one really nice thing about cycle touring through Spain is that many of the towns and villages, especially in the more mountainous regions, they actually have these fountains where you can take your bottle and you can get some nice, clean, free drinking water. So if you're cycle touring through Spain and you need to get some water before heading to the nearest shop, maybe take a look around whichever town or village you find yourself in, because you may be able to locate one of these fountains and get yourself some nice, free drinking water. So one cool thing about cycle touring in Spain is the presence of greenways. So greenways were previously train tracks, but they've been converted into paths that are now used by pedestrians and cyclists. There's about 120 of them in the country, and they range from a few kilometers to over 100 kilometers. They're a nice way to see the country because they tend to be relatively flat. They were previously used by trains, and because there's no traffic, and because in many cases these stations have been converted into useful services such as hostels and restaurants. So if you're thinking about doing a cycle tour in Spain, I'd recommend checking out the Greenways website. I'll put a link to it below, and perhaps you can think about incorporating some greenways into your route across Spain. So another great thing about cycle touring in Spain is that it's often free to take your bike on the ferry. So I recently travelled with a company called Balearia from Barcelona to Ibiza and back, and they charged me about €100 for the ticket, and I wasn't charged anything extra for taking my bike. I know you can find some very cheap flights to the Spanish islands, but I think when you factor in the costs associated with taking a bike on the flight, it's probably no cheaper to fly than it is to take the boat. So if you're thinking about cyclotouring through Spain and you're thinking about checking out some of the islands, taking a ferry out to them could be a great option. So lots of people have heard about this famous pilgrimage called the Camino de Santiago, which is most commonly done from a town in the south of France over to Santiago de Compostela, a city in the northwest of Spain. And I have stumbled across a few of these routes while cyclotouring through Spain. For example, I've stumbled across the Camino del Norte, which follows the north coast of Spain. I've done a bit of the Camino Frances while passing through Pamplona, and I've done a bit of the Camino del Ebro while passing through Zaragoza. I haven't done a full Camino yet, but I would love to do so at one point, and I'll definitely make a video about that when I do. But I think the Caminos would be a great way of exploring Spain by bike because they have lots of facilities. There's lots of restaurants, hostels, campsites. They're often well signposted and relatively traffic free. And each year about 20,000 people who complete the Camino de Santiago do so on a bike. So they're pretty well set up for cyclists. So if you're thinking about cyclotouring through Spain and you're not sure about which route to take, maybe check out a few Camino de Santiago options because you might find that one of those is a good option for you. So those are some of the things I learned while cyclotouring through Spain. If you yourself have been to Spain, I'd love to hear about your experiences and the things you've learned, so please feel free to put them in a comment below. Likewise, if you're thinking about cyclotouring through Spain and you have some questions, put them in a comment and I'll get back to you as soon as I can. I hope you found this video somewhat useful or helpful in some way, and I hope that if you go to Spain to ride your bike, you have an amazing trip. Thanks a lot for watching, and I'll see you next time.